Call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the mask is beginning to slip on the National Party side of the House, and we're actually finally starting to see what their true long-term agenda for tertiary education is actually going to be. Because David Bennett said that they don't regard money spent on the student loan scheme as money spent on tertiary education. And actually that's a load of rubbish. The amount of money that's spent on the student loan scheme through interest-free student loans has made a massive difference to over 600,000 New Zealanders who have a student loan balance. That's not including those who have already paid them off. We on this side of the House believe that spending money to improve the student loan scheme, to lower the cost of borrowing to our students and our graduates is money well spent, because it's money that encourages people to take up the opportunities of tertiary education, to upskill themselves, to get better jobs. We think it's money well spent, and we think it's a great investment in the future of our country. I want to talk a little bit about the loan scheme itself. Of course, it's worth remembering when we're debating this quite significant overhaul of the student loan scheme legislation, where the origins of the original legislation started back in 1992, when the National Party, having promised to abolish the cost of fees for tertiary education, in fact, increase them, introduced the student loan scheme to allow people to pay for it, while simultaneously at the same time abolishing living allowances for students. And in that year, between 1992 and 2001, the number of students getting a student allowance dropped from 86% to 36% because of the National Party's broken election promises back there in the early 1990s. As a result, what we're talking about today with this bill is over 600,000 New Zealanders who are going to be affected by these changes that we're debating to the student loan scheme. The nominal value of student loan balances as it stands now, as it standed at the end of 2009, was 11 billion, I believe, $11 billion, and it's forecast to increase to $15 billion by 2015. That's a significant amount of money. But I want to talk about repayment of student loans, is something that's covered in this bill. Because when we introduced interest-free student loans, when the last Labour government introduced interest-free student loans, the then National Party spearheaded their campaign spearheaded by John Key, who said he was going to fight the policy with every bone in his body, argued that no student, no graduate would repay their loan. In time, it would, the time for repayment would massively increase as a result of the interest-free student loan bribe, as the National Party called it. And I notice now that the median repayment time for those who left study in 2006, which was, of course, when the interest-free student loans was introduced, and who have remained in New Zealand, is now forecast to be 4.6 years. Now, when we introduced interest-free student loans, we were looking at a median repayment time up around 9 years. So what we've actually seen is a significant reduction in the amount of time it's taking people to repay their loans, and a big chunk of that is because of the interest-free student loans policy. And I think that's something that we should definitely welcome. I think that's something that we on this side of the House are very proud of. There was a lot of debate during the committee stage around students who work during their summer holidays and the impact that these changes in this bill will have on them. And I'm very pleased to hear that provision has been made for students who do their summer holiday jobs and earn a reasonably significant amount of money within a short period of time, and then use that money over the course of the term to pay for their studies and to pay for their cost of living. There are provisions to exempt them from mandatory student loan repayments. I think that's a very welcome thing. I am concerned, as my colleague Grant Robertson said, that this will rely on them making application, and I hope that the government will make that process very easy for students and also make sure that the information is readily available to them. Because I think working during the summer holidays or during the term break in the middle of the year is something that we want to encourage students to do, because while they are doing that, they're earning money that's going to result in them borrowing less. And the more we can encourage students to borrow less, the smaller their loan balance at the end of their study will be, and the faster they will be able to pay it off once they finish their tertiary study. So I think we want to incentivise them for working during their study break, not penalise them. And I think that it's really important that, because we're talking here about 58% of full-time students undertaking full-time work during the summer break. 64% of full-time students undertake regular part-time work during the term, and that figure increases to 90% when we're talking about casual work. So that provision is very, very important. I think there's probably I think it would be great if we could get to the point where a student doesn't need to go through a large series of hoops in order to get that exemption. In my committee stage, and speaking on the committee stage, I talked about some of the problems with the way the student loan scheme is administered at the moment, and how difficult it can be for a graduate or even a current student to get accurate information about their student loan balance. And I think it's absolutely fantastic that the IRD are going to be able to do something about that as a result of the changes in this bill. That's very important, because at the moment the student loan scheme being administered by two different parties. We've got the StudyLink administering it for the current year of study, and the IRD administering, if you like, the historical part, which is those balances, once they're transferred from StudyLink to the IRD, are actually easier to keep track of. But when they're with StudyLink, if you're still studying, you've obviously got two agencies at the moment that you need to deal with to work out what the true extent of your student loan is. And this bill here will make that significantly easier for students by providing real-time information through the IRD, where people will be able to look it up online. That's good news not just for current students so that they know where their loan is tracking. It'll be good news for graduates who are overseas for a period of time but want to keep up their repayments. One of the things that we want to encourage people to do is, when they're going overseas, make sure they keep up their student loan repayments while they're away. It's not a bad thing for graduates to want to go overseas, do their OE, get some work experience in a different country, and we want to make it easy for them to keep up loan repayments while they're doing that. Because if they don't get into default while they're away overseas, they're more likely to come back. Actually, someone getting into default on their student loan repayments while they're overseas, then it becomes a disincentive for them to come back to New Zealand. So helping them to make it as easy as possible for them to make their student loan repayments, to check their balances and to do all that sort of thing from overseas is really important. And of course, electronic means are the best way to do that. Somebody being able to log in and check their student loan balance and repayments just as they check their bank balance, I think is a really welcome step. So I'm really pleased that the bill that we're currently debating in the House provides for that to happen. I do have some concerns that, some of this may be paving the way for the National Party to implement the reintroduction of interest following the next election. They haven't actually made a concrete commitment not to do that yet. They said before the last election that they wouldn't do it in their first term of government, and yet they've been very silent about whether or not, in fact, interest would be reintroduced in a second term of a national government. I hope that they will be very clear with the students and graduates of New Zealand about that prior to the coming election, because we know very clearly that Stephen Joyce privately and around the corridors of Parliament has said that he would like to reintroduce interest on student loans, even if it was at a nominal interest rate. And I think that he has been saying that, and it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if in a second term of national government that was one of the things that we saw coming through. And so I think I'm very concerned that this bill may well be paving the way for that. Having said that, most of the provisions in the bill are pretty good. We oppose parts of it. We oppose the increase of the administrative fee for setting up a student loan. We think that's unnecessary, given IRD are probably going to end up saving money out of this. But on balance, the Labour Party is going to be voting in favour of it.
Cool. Aaron Gilmore.
I'm going to take a very